Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the December Curriculum Subcommittee meeting. So happy to be here with everybody today. We've got a nice full agenda of good topics to talk about. I apologize for not being here last week, but I did watch the video and it was a really great, insightful overview of the technology goals and uses in the in Hurlbut. So I look forward to us continuing on with that technology conversation today. We are waiting to see if we can connect with one of our other board members. So we're going to postpone the approval of the last 2 months of minutes until the end to see if we can make that connection. Otherwise, I think we should just go ahead with the agenda as is.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Kingsley. Just as a reminder for those of you that are watching, the purpose of our subcommittee curriculum meeting is to collaborate between the Board of Education stakeholders and school-based leadership to discuss aspects of curriculum instruction, school culture, and climate within the Weston Public Schools. In addition, because we are meeting virtually, we just want to remind you of our norms. We really want to see your beautiful faces, so please try to keep your cameras on at all times. You can always blur the background. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. Try to be present and engaged in the conversation. Always seek to understand, and we do have a full agenda today, so please try to keep the discussion, comments, and questions on point. Okay. So Bernie, did you want to start with the minutes, or I'm sorry, what did you say about the minutes again?
I think we'll wait till the end to see if we can connect with Chad by the end of the call.
Fantastic. Okay, so some old business. I'm gonna, before I throw the mic over to Principal Canetta and Liz Morris, our curriculum instruction leader for music, K-12. We have a final course that we are proposing for next school year within the program of studies before we finalize the program for our students and our parents as they begin their scheduling process for next school year. And so we have a brief overview regarding that new course that we will be adding to the program of studies. And so that's the wrong tab. So Principal Canetta and Liz, would you like to, I'm going to toss the mic to you.
Thanks for having us. So we have another course we would like to propose to add to our program of studies starting next year for the 24-25 school year. I'm going to turn it over to Liz so she can talk to you a little bit about the course. It is not only a course at the high school, but it is also a UConn early college experience course, which we are excited for the opportunity to bring one of these courses into our repertoire at Weston High School. So Liz, take it over.
Hi, can everybody hear me? I'm on hardwired headphones, so I just want to make sure. Okay, so this is popular music and diversity. This is an introduction to popular music and diversity in America. It covers jazz, blues, hip hop, top 40, all kinds of American music. And it also is a course that really gets into the role of popular music in our society as part of our culture, as part of our American experience. You can read here, this is kind of the overview of what the course is. We also get into, towards the end of that course, the influence of technology and mass media on our musical or popular music. So, and this is an ECE course through UConn. So this is something that is kind of set in what the requirements are. The textbook is a requirement through UConn. Two texts, actually. The Pop, Rock, and Soul Reader is one of them. I have this one right here, and American Popular Music. And it kind of, the course itself, the syllabus kind of follows the American Popular Music text through the genres, beginning with the popular song genres in the 1920s, all the way through to contemporary music. We're excited about it because it is something that allows some of our students who are not in our performing ensembles a point of access for our program. Currently, we offer digital music, which is very specific. We offer our performing ensembles, which are also very specific. But this is kind of a course. It's a nice intro, a nice place for students to kind of enter the program, and, kind of pursue, could possibly pursue other things from there, could possibly, take up an instrument or take music theory class or something. So it's just really for students who have an interest in music and popular music in our society.
Great job. So as a reminder, you have the full course proposal and outline is located on Board Book if you wanted more details specifically around the course. We're excited to offer a UConn ECE course in this format, a full year course. And I also think if Megan, Principal Canetta, or Liz, if you could also make some connections to the Portrait of the Graduate, and maybe this is an option for students to begin exploring how this may help in that 4-year pathway for them.
Sure. Students can use this as certainly a class where they can write a reflection on any of the work in this class, certainly the creativity component of the Portrait of the Graduate. Communication as well. I mean, there are various ways that the students will produce various materials in the class that would meet any of those Portrait of the Graduate competencies as we continue to embed those in our curricular documents. I think, as Liz said, I think the really important piece to recognize is the access point. And as we look at our program of studies, ensuring that there are opportunities for all students to access our music program. And so often I think students, as they progress, there might be a feeling once you get to the high school, you have an interest in music. I think, there's such a contemporary interest for our kids in various genres, and kind of knowing the history of those genres, like the history of hip hop. I think it was, we celebrated last year, 50 years of hip hop, I think, in the United States. So having kids just have some of those experiences and understanding more of the history, and also giving kids permission to have these opportunities and experiences. And I'm not in an ensemble and I can still have an interest in music, right? And have an interest in this field. I have a brother who did not major in music necessarily, did not, was not in an ensemble in high school, and yet he is working in production and music production and audio production. And these are ways to inspire students and to make them aware of other career pathways as well, which I think is really important. There are just so many opportunities in creative industries for students to really find a future career path.
That's great. I love the essential questions of this course. How does music shape the human experience? How does the human experience shape popular music? And how does music reflect the identity of a society? So quite compelling essential questions within this course, and allows students to kind of explore music in a different way and see it in a different light. So we're really excited to offer this for next school year. We'll see the interest level, and we'll be able to give you some updates as we move into next school year. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Principal Canetta. Any questions on this course?
I've got 2 questions. My first question is, it sounds like it's about history of music, and I understand the perfect fit with the music department. Any thought about giving cross credit for a history or social studies course if a student wants to take that instead of some of the other social studies options?
Bernie, I think that's definitely food for thought. I think we want to run the course, for a first pass of the course, really understand and get to know the course. The essential questions might certainly lend themselves to that as well. And then there's potential that we could also provide humanities credit for sure.
I can add a little bit. There is a huge listening component to this course, and that's what really makes it a music course, is that there is a difference between taking a history of popular music course and a history course. There is a lot of history involved, obviously, and yes, there's a text, but there's also a huge amount of listening to be done, and of analysis. Some of the other things that you were talking about with Portrait of a Graduate, I was thinking there is a couple of, depending on how we structure it, a couple of case studies that could be written, but could also be recorded podcasts. There's a variety of different ways to deliver it. So those were a couple of other things I was thinking as you guys were talking.
That makes a lot of sense. My last question is just to clarify for everybody listening, what exactly ECE is and why it's such a great thing for our students to be taking.
Liz, you want me to take it? You can chime in.
Sure. Yeah. I'll keep myself unmuted.
Yeah. The UConn ECE classes ECE stands for Early College Experience. So this is an opportunity, what we call dual credit, where students can be taking the course in high school. It's aligned to the course curriculum at the University of Connecticut. And then students can pay for optional UConn credit if they fulfill the requirements needed to earn that credit. And then a UConn transcript would be produced. And then when the students, if they choose to go to college and they're entering into college, they can bring that UConn transcript with them for transfer credit and earn potentially 3 college credits towards their college experience.
And the cost is minimal compared to actually taking a college course. It's $50 a credit so if it's a 3-credit class, it's $150 for the course, as opposed to they say it's like a 90% savings or something like that to take the course. It's pretty good.
And there are a number of ECE courses that high schools do offer. So this is our entry into the world of ECE. And we're really excited that our music department was really interested in this. So it'll give us a taste of ECE so we can continue to look at future potential for students to earn some college credit and pursue the dual enrollments for their high school career.
Seems like a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Okay, so that, thank you, Liz. Thank you, Megan, for that. We appreciate that thorough introduction of the course. We're really excited to see how the students respond once it goes live, when they start their scheduling in February, right, Megan? I think that's when they're starting. But January or February? I saw your weekly update and I couldn't remember the date.
February, March.
February.
So they get course recommendations in February. They meet with counselors, and so it's a whole process.
Yes, so it all starts in February, right? Okay, good timing. So now they know they have another option if they choose. This is great. Okay, we're going to move on to the next, our first new agenda item, which is a overnight field trip request. And we are joined, thank you, Liz. We are joined by Dan Passarelli. He is going to be providing an overview of the overnight field trip request. You have the thorough itinerary. You have all the details of the trip located in the board book. I just want to make sure that people recognize this is not a typo. Mr. Passarelli is very organized and he's a planner. So this trip is for the spring vacation of 2025. So that's not this year, it's the year after. But as you would expect, it does require a lot of planning and a lot of communication and a lot of details and logistics when it comes to overnight field trips. And so that is why we are here this evening. So Mr. Passarelli, would you like to take the mic?
Thanks, Tina. Thank you to the board for the opportunity here. Yeah, my name is Dan Passarelli. I'm a social studies teacher at the high school. I've sponsored 2 previous trips with Weston High School students to Europe in the past. In 2018, we went on a World War II themed trip to England, France, and Germany. And then just this past spring, we went on an Amadeus themed tour, which went to Venice and Salzburg, Austria, and Vienna, Austria, and wound up in Prague in the Czech Republic. We had 29 kids on that trip, and it was a really, really great experience. All the kids that went on had a really great time. And so for this next trip, and my whole sort of intent here is to sort of make school trips and overseas trips kind of like a fabric of the high school culture, to kind of make it a thing that happens annually or at least semi-annually. And so in looking at the next trip, we had kind of been to Central Europe and Western Europe. And we were kind of wondering what we could do next and who else on a curricular level I could partner up with. And so my co-teacher on this next trip is going to be Amanda Telford, who's the Latin teacher. And so it's really great opportunity for her students on the Latin side, as well as my students on the history side, to go see both Greece and Italy on what they call the Cradle of Civilization tour. So you kind of see what the itinerary includes. It is a really, really awesome experience with a really, really great company. I think that's the one thing that's fantastic is, in planning the first trip, I really looked into what the different companies offer. And the company that we use, called ACIS, is by far the best in terms of quality, in terms of value for your dollar. Everything that they do is top notch. And, especially since COVID, they've added a lot of protections for, situations that may arise, including, like refunds up to 4 days before we leave, centrally located hotels, really, really great tour guides. It's a great company. They provide, first-rate experiences. And so we're excited to, with your approval, to start to pitch the trip and hopefully get some kids on board for not this spring, but the following spring. And to that point, I know Tina said it's not this coming spring, but because of the cost of the trip, it's an international trip and it's a commitment. And so the planning ahead was, to try and get kids the opportunity and the awareness and to start saving if they needed to. So they'll have a lot of time to be able to prepare to pay for the trip and be able to do it right up until we leave.
That's great, Dan. Just to clarify a couple of the bullets here. So it's offered, correct me if I'm wrong, what grade levels is it offered to students in?
Usually sophomores through seniors. Yeah. So kids that are sophomores now will be in their spring of their senior year. I've taken freshmen before. I think, they're eligible. Obviously there's no limits from the company to do that. It's just 10 to 12 is generally who tends to go.
Makes sense. And we've highlighted some of the, educational events based on the itinerary here. So it looks like they're going to have an amazing time.
It's fantastic. Yeah, this is according to the liaison that I work with at the company, this girl, Jessica Ricci. She says it's like one of the more popular trips that they have. And, all the reviews from past participants are through the roof. So really great experience. It's a good time of year to be going to that part of Europe. And the great part about it is, outside from, just like the normal trips of like, kind of touring and, just going to historical sites, they include appropriately a bunch of the cultural stuff.
Yeah.
So we're going to, one of the things that's not on there, but when we're in Greece, one of the meals that we have is actually going to be kind of like part of a Greek cultural program. And so not only are they going to like get, Greek food and everything one night for dinner, but there's going to be like a sort of a Greek dance lesson and instruction the kids can participate in. Everywhere we go, there's some sort of cultural component, which this company is really, really big on.
I love that.
So it's a really great company. Everything that we've done with them has been fantastic. And, if this trip is the same, the kids will have a really, really great time.
Yeah. And how many students are we opening it to?
As many as want to register. The company, one of the other things that distinguishes this company from others is that there is a 6 student to 1 chaperone ratio, right? So you really get a lot of attention for the kids. There's a lot of supervision. And so for every 6 kids that we get to register, another teacher gets to go. So there's already a lot of teachers in talking about this potential trip. A lot of teachers are excited about the opportunity. And so aside from myself and Amanda, there's a few other teachers who are very curious as to, if we get it approved and when we start advertising, how many kids are going to register.
Yeah, that's great. So that's another reason why Dan was really making sure that you're prepared and getting on the agenda, because you'll see on the itinerary right now, we don't have all the details for the flight or the hotel, because we first need to make sure that we know how many students are truly interested and committed to going, so then he can finalize the chaperones, and then he can finalize all the additional details as it gets a little closer. So that's why we're bringing it to the board now for final approval during the full board this month. So he can continue planning and looking for more commitments from the chaperones and the students. Correct, Dan?
Yeah, I was looking to start to get kids a little bit before the new year, because the company offers incentives. If I start advertising next week before break, the company will have incentives for like scholarships, is what they call, which is basically kind of like a raffle to get money deducted off of the cost of the trip. And so there was like a somewhat of a deadline in that sense. But I think Jessica will who's currently actually she goes on vacation, and her vacation is basically going to all the places that the company goes to. It's a kind of ridiculous experience. Like she was telling me what her agenda is for like the Christmas holiday, and I was just completely, utterly jealous. But I think she would work with us to maybe push it to like the middle of January to as an incentive to get kids to register. If they do by a certain date, they could potentially win like I think it's like 5% off the cost of the trip.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Yep. It's
Thank
a
you
great
for
company. They're again, I've not had like any issues. It's amazing when you see how connected they are to the cities that we've gone to. I've been to Spain, I've been to obviously the countries I mentioned before, and the people that the company works with in these cities are like just like kind of really, really tied into what goes on there. There's never a concern or a question about what's happening. It's so orderly and efficient, and it's why I just keep going back to them for the trips.
Well said. That's great. No, I would agree. Any questions for Dan? This very well done. Thank you, Dan, for putting all this together. Love your Christmas tree in the background. Any questions for Dan before we do ask that it goes? Basically, what happens here, Dan, just to be clear for everybody too, as long as there's no questions or additional concerns, Bernie would then present it in front of the full board. We'll put it on the agenda, and then everyone will vote whether or not they would like to approve the field trip for Dan to continue planning. All right.
Sounds fantastic.
I agree.
If it's like the other trips, it will be. It's a really, really it's a great company, and on the agenda of this trip, it seems like a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah,
We had options.
Time to go.
We had options about. There's another trip that goes to Florence, but I think appropriately, it's a lot at that point. And so, and for Amanda's curricular purposes, going to Sorrento and Pompeii was a little bit more aligned with what she does. So.
Yeah.
Either way, it's going to be awesome for the kids, and I think Pompeii will really be something that the kids will love. So,
can't wait to hear all about it when you come back. So that's
Yeah,
great.
sure.
I love the.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dan. All right. So the next, we have two presentations, very in-depth presentations. One's a follow-up from last month's curriculum meeting, and the second one is a new presentation. So as we always do, we are joined by many of our leaders out in the field and in the buildings, and I'm going to switch and toggle over to the technology integration presentation, which is a continuation of the K2 presentation that Ms. Rodko presented during last month's curriculum meeting. One of the goals this school year is to look at our K-12 integration of technology in our content areas across the curriculum and within the district. And so I asked the library media specialists who are in the thick of this work to come and present about how they have been integrating technology, digital literacy into the classrooms, also into the libraries. And every month we've been highlighting one grade band to kind of talk about that K-12 trajectory. Ms. Rodko was the first one to kick off that conversation last month, and she did a fantastic job. And so today we're joined by Shelly Reines, our library media specialist at Weston Intermediate School. And she's going to take us through how they integrate information and digital literacy and technology at the 3rd through 5th grade levels. And then following that, we're also joined, if anyone sees, we're joined by Helen Knutson, who is our library media specialist at the middle school. And she will be having the next phase of the conversation, which we'll actually present in February. Okay, so thank you, Shelly, for coming. Patty Falber is here as well. And so I'm going to ask them to take the mic and lead us through that presentation.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, everyone, for having us. We are excited to share what we're doing over at WIS. So a big shout out to Sharon Rodko, who really took on the hard work of explaining how the library media world kind of combines two big sets of standards from ISTE and from AASL, and we sort of live right in between them, bringing in elements from both. There's a lot that's similar between the two sets of standards, but I really thank Sharon for doing all that hard work explaining that last month. That can be found at the beginning of this same slide presentation if anyone wasn't here last month and wants to look a little bit more at that. So I'm going to be continuing the conversation for the grade 3 to 5 lens. How do we integrate technology, and how do we integrate the information, digital, and technology literacies here at WIS? Tina, so I just the next slide when I'm okay.
Yep. I was going to do that for you. I just wanted to interject for one moment, which I forgot to mention. We did allocate about 30 minutes to each one of these in-depth presentations to be mindful of everyone's time and schedule. That includes question and answers. We're on track. And if we do have additional questions at the end of each of these two presentations, because we want to make sure we give equal airtime to both of the groups that are here tonight, just please put them in the chat and we will be glad to come back to the conversation and follow up on additional questions that we might not be able to get to answer by the end of today's meeting. Okay, thanks, Shelley. Keep going.
All right. So where we come from when we're thinking about how we integrate these skills into our curriculum, there's a lot of things that we consider. I did steal, Sharon, one of your graphics about that passive versus active use, where we're looking to integrate technology in a way where students are active and engaged learners. They're not just consuming, but they're creating. And so that graphic with the state of participation, that active production level is where we're really looking to be. If we're going to integrate technology, we're going to do it in a way that enhances learning. As Sharon put it in our last meeting, we're way past the point of just using tech to use tech. At this point, we're using technology to create a more valuable learning experience for our kids. I do have some graphics from our big 2 digital citizenship curriculums that we use. And the first is Common Sense Media, Digital Literacy, and Digital Citizenship curriculum. They really emphasize media balance, online privacy, knowing your digital footprint, news and media literacy. But then we also do use some resources from Be Internet Awesome, which is the Google Digital Citizenship curriculum. And I think at this age in particular, digital citizenship is such a huge component of what we do, because we really want to prep our students to be able to navigate the digital world in a safe and healthy and responsible way.
And just to clarify, there's some additional images on this screen that may be different from the actual attachment, but this is the slide that we're on.
Yes, I did just add the Internet Awesome today. Sorry about that, Tina. I thought that it might be great to just take a moment to think about the top skills that we really want our students to have by the time they graduate. And World Economic Forum releases the top 10 skills every year that they're thinking that they believe employers are looking for. And so when the library media department met and we were kind of thinking about how to structure these presentations and how best to showcase what we do, this was something that we thought really represented our work, because if you look at the top 5 skills, technological literacy doesn't even come until number 6, because those top 5 skills are really, no matter where you end up, going to be super important for our kids to have. And so this is really what we do. And these top skills are really at the heart of our curriculum. And so what you're going to see today, that these skills are really threaded throughout the different lessons and experiences that we offer our kids through the library program. We also, there's, over the years been a lot of talk about hard skills versus soft skills. And really the hard skills, Tina, you can go to next slide. Thank you. Really the soft skills, which it's ironic because they often are the hardest skills for students to develop and learn, especially at our age. But the soft skills, that communication and flexibility and leadership and teamwork, those really are the skills that employers are looking for. And those are the skills that we want to develop in our students through our curriculum. So the Portrait of a Graduate in Weston has 6 buckets that I think align really closely with those top skills and the things that employers are looking for. And I think that's really where our Portrait of a Graduate comes from, is thinking about what do we want our students to have by the time they leave and they're graduating our schools. And so the library department was thinking about this portrait of a graduate and how it really aligns so well with the ISTE standards and with the AASL standards. And so we use the portrait of a graduate sort of as a structure for today. So we have 5 buckets. We did combine cares for self and cares for others into one, but we have 5 buckets or domains that we're going to look at from the portrait of a graduate and kind of speak to how we address each of those and how they align with our standards too. So the first one is thinks critically, which lines up very well with our ASL. You can see that the ASL standard and ITSE standard are included there, inquire and think critically, and knowledge constructor. And so what we also thought would be great is to really show how we balance tech integration in our school. And so we're going to share some examples that reflect how tech integration helps us with these skills. But then we also have what we're calling unplugged examples of how we're also working on the same skill without a screen or without a device to kind of show how we do strike that balance, because that's a big part of what we do. So with Thinks Critically, a big piece of this is the information literacy part and being able to navigate digital resources. So using what we call our CARP test to evaluate websites and to know if something's credible and reliable, being able to use our 5th graders, how do you use Google in a way that's going to produce the best results, the most accurate results for a research project? And using our research databases like Scholastic Go, how to use those resources. This includes how to cite sources and how to avoid plagiarism and skills that are going to allow students to gather information from multiple digital sources and synthesize and put together that information into a product. And unplugged versions of our Thinks Critically, we do have a lot of print books. And so when it comes to research, the students aren't just using digital databases to research, they're also using print resources and learning how to merge the information from those print resources with maybe some digital resources and really come up with the best information and the best product.
So Shelley, real quick, this is an example of how you are supporting the curriculum in a specific content area, enhancing maybe a unit of study, right? A unit of
Yes.
study.
So these examples in particular are from a 3rd grade research project they call the Endangered Animals Project, where the students use some digital databases, but then also print resources to teach their classmates about an endangered species, not just about the species, but then why they're endangered and what we can do to help. It's a great project.
Yeah, love it. Looks a lot of fun.
So next domain, communicates with purpose. This is a big one for us too. How can they share knowledge and be creative communicators through the ASL and ISTE standards also? So a big piece of this domain for us is using video. So the top 2 photos there, you see a picture of our production room with a green screen background. Students use this room to produce videos, sometimes for a class project, but we also produce the WIS Daily News every day in there. You see students using a teleprompter app to create a film for their classmates. The films can range in topics. I'll share one in a little bit that was about digital citizenship, but you can see the video with the frozen background was a book talk created by a 5th grader to promote a reading book that he recommended for students in his class. And then I also do have a clip of our WIS Daily News, so you can kind of see the before and after of the green screen room and what it becomes once it's a finished product. So using technology in this way for students to learn how to communicate with a specific audience is something that, if thinking about those key skills that we want, our portrait of a graduate includes that effective that communicates with purpose, because that's going to be something that we want our students to have. And so in this case, integrating tech so that they can feel that they're creating an authentic product for an authentic audience, I think is really valuable for them. We do also, on the unplugged side of this skill, there's a lot that we do.
Do you want me to play any of these, Shelley? Or
you can. I wasn't sure.
How long are they?
Oh, you could just play a couple of seconds. I think on the left, Tina, if you wanted play. Just so
Yeah,
they
I
can
liked
see-
watching them, but I couldn't remember how long they were. These are so cute. We've got to see
Definitely
them.
just play maybe a few seconds of the WIS Daily News so they can kind of see the before and the after. So there's
Okay,
this
ready?
news recording. Yep.
Hopefully this works. Hold on. No?
If you hit that red button in the center, it should.
I was trying. Oh,
I even just tried to do it on my own screen, like I have control of it. That's okay.
I know. I'm
They're
sorry.
there. Everyone can view them. You know, they are cute.
Let me see if I. See, I knew I was going to have a hiccup. Wait a sec. Share audio, share. Curriculum committee. It's this one. Okay, now can you see it? Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Good morning. This is Winston and Grayson coming from Channel 5 Pride Newsroom.
So you can just kind of
Today
have
is
an
Friday,
idea.
December 1st, 2023.
I love the
Let's
background.
go to Winston's birthday news.
Thanks, Grayson. We have one student birthday to announce today. Happy birthday to
So you get the idea. They, you know, they're really proud of their
We
finished
also have
product.
one staff birthday to celebrate today. Happy birthday to Mrs. Brooks.
Aw, that's so great.
Also, several birthdays over the weekend to announce.
I could watch this all
Happy
day.
early birthday to Evelyn Moore, Claire
stop.
Langiel.
Yeah, I think that,
Also,
you know, I
happy
just
early
wanted
birthday
to
to
kind of
Remy
show a
and
finished product so that people had to, could
Joe would like to
see.
recognize the Browns.
Oh, and then you
Stephanie,
switch.
and
Oh,
Landis
cute.
for showing awesome discipline during our surprise drill at recess last week. You listened to directions and did a fantastic job. Way to go. Next, Mrs. Noonan would like to recognize the Disneys for being so
This is our
respectful
Pride
during
News.
their book checkout. The Disneys used their
Classes
library
receive
space
Pride
exactly
Pause
as they should.
when they show WIS Pride.
They browsed their books and
Love
found a quiet spot to
Okay, I'm
Thanks, Tina.
gonna toggle back. They're so cute. I love it.
And they take it very seriously. They really take pride in their production, and they know that it's their responsibility to deliver the news to their classmates. And they do a great job with it. All fifth graders actually are a part of the WIS News team, and they all help create the segments and obviously record in our production room. And they do a wonderful job. But again, this communicates with purpose. It's not always just communicating with a screen. That person-to-person communication is super important, and that's something that we address too in our curriculum, because I think that that teamwork and collaboration side of the Portrait of a Graduate and of those key skills, I think that that's a huge component of what goes on in our library and in our makerspace. So just a couple of examples here of students working together to accomplish a task or solve a problem. And I'll talk a little bit more about a couple of these examples. But then we also have some other examples of when students in person use their communication skills. We have some real louds, and we also had a live museum in our library where students create an exhibit, and then classes come through the museum, and they're the museum guides, and they're telling classes about a significant figure in history.
So who do you know who those? Is that Michael Jackson's?
It is Michael Jackson, yes.
And
So
is that a different version of Michael Jackson on the right? No.
I
who's
think that they were just trying to increase engagement in their museum
Okay.
exhibit, and so they thought they would dress up and show off some of the dance moves as well.
Yeah, look at that. That's pretty amazing. I can see that. And what are these last two, Shelley?
The two photos.
Yeah.
One of them is from our Kiva Plank Challenge, which I'll talk a little bit more in the problem solving, and then also a reverse engineering project that I'll also talk about in problem solving with 3D snowflakes.
Awesome.
Those are from our makerspace, kind of trying to combine our library with the makerspace to have examples from both. All right, so solving problems, identifying and solving problems from the ASL and computational thinker. This is really where we'd like to highlight the work that we do with coding. And coding is something that I think is super valuable for the kids because it's not just about learning how to code. We use primarily block coding, although we do have some really expert coders who are coding with HTML and Unity, and they're doing some impressive things. But the majority of students are using block code, and really the skills that we're working on here are being able to express creativity, but also being able to solve problems and being able to think like a coder and be able to use that if-then logic and create code that runs effectively. And then when it doesn't run effectively, being able to look at it critically and be able to find the bug, which is an error in your code, to help your code run better. So the students, across the board, students love coding. They love seeing what they can create with code, and they love the challenge of solving problems with code. So just last week, we had our it was Computer Science Education Week, and we had an hour of code in our school, and it was really, the students love it. It was great. But I think it's also one of those really valuable skills, not just computer coding itself. I think that's going to be a super valuable skill, but just knowing that how connected coding is with creativity, communication, solving problems, critical thinking. It's kind of its own literacy. Being able to read and write code is something that I think a lot of students both enjoy and can learn a lot from. So in our makerspace, particularly this solving problems part of the Portrait of a Graduate, there are a lot of unplugged examples of this in our makerspace. Students come to the makerspace to work together, to collaborate, to solve problems. So we have some examples here. We did have a Rubik's Cube contest, which the Rubik's Cubing is very popular right now, but I don't know that the kids necessarily realize how great it is for their brains too, how much of a problem solving activity and a critical thinking activity that is. But we also have, like I said, a lot of collaboration, team-based problem solving that goes on in our makerspace. All the way on the right is an example of the Kiva Plank challenge. Students in teams had a set of design challenges to use Kiva planks to complete in a certain amount of time. So lots of activities offered like that through our program. Again, thinking about tech integration and balance, there's lots of ways to use tech to help students learn how to solve problems, but there's also a lot of ways that we use, that we choose not to use tech to enforce these skills and reinforce these skills. Cares for others and self. This is where I think that digital citizenship component really comes in, and even in the AASL standards, the ethical and productive citizens of society. So a huge piece of what we teach when it comes to technology is that ethical use component and knowing essentially how to be a good person when you're on a device and when you're in the digital world. And so this is a really important area for us to integrate these skills while using devices, because this is the world that our students live in. And we have our digital citizenship charter, which is essentially our charter for how to be a good person when using your WIS Chromebook. And it ranges from how to take care of that Chromebook, the physical hardware, all the way through how to keep your passwords secure, how to be kind and respectful online, and how to use your school Chromebook for school purposes and to improve your education. So we have, as I mentioned before, a couple of curriculums that we draw from the Internet Awesome curriculum from Google and also the Common Sense Media digital citizenship curriculum. But I think this is another opportunity for students to be those creators and to be those producers instead of those consumers. And so the video on the right is was created using a program called Canva, which many of you are probably familiar with. So this student created sort of a PSA for knowing about your digital footprint. So I don't know if you can hit play, Tina, but just an example of how students use a digital app like Canva to produce.
Walking on the beach is a lot like using your computer. Even as you're doing the simplest of things, your data is being leaked. People can follow your footprints and take the data that are left in it.
So the task was for students to think about one element of our digital citizenship charter and to give a reminder to students in our school about how to be a good person while using your WIS Chromebook. And this student in particular really wanted to focus on his digital footprint because he didn't think a lot of students really understood what a digital footprint was. So I thought that was a great example of using Canva or using a digital app to be a producer or creator of content.
I love the little icons that he put in the.
I know.
in the polls.
Yeah.
That was very creative, very cute.
Yeah. And so we also, again, just want to emphasize that there's a balance here, that even though digital citizenship, of course, must be connected to digital devices, there's a lot that we do in our program that's really about being a good person, caring for yourself and caring for others. That would be unplugged activities. And so I just wanted to highlight that as well. So we have our Caught Being Kind program, and we run fundraisers through the library, and we have some activities where student council goes into the classrooms and helps lead a classroom activity that's about, making the world a better place or being kind or world peace. And so there's a lot that we do unplugged as well for these two components of the Portrait of a Graduate. All right. And so last, but I don't think least, because I actually needed 3 slides for this one, expresses creativity, I think, is a huge piece of our standards and our curriculum. And this is something that I think, thinking of those really important skills that we want kids to have, and thinking about our standards and thinking about the benefits of technology, there's a lot that students can do with devices to express creativity. And so I have some examples. We have 2 3D printers in our library, in our makerspace, and the students, our 5th graders, use Tinkercad, which is CAD design software, to design products. So they design them in the software and then are able to see them come to life on the printers, which is very cool. And then we also have some students producing stop motion. I have another example of a student working on a digital citizenship Canva project. And then this is an app that we use in our Maker Play area called Brickit. And you can take a photograph of a whole pile of Legos, and they'll generate some images of what you could create. And it's a great way to spark ideas for students and to help them design Lego projects. And I did want to share just one video. There was a student, a 3rd grader, who tried stop motion with me during class, and then went home and over the weekend created his own stop motion project. And then his parent emailed it to me because she was so impressed with it. And I just think this is a great example of what we do. Our role is to expose kids to opportunities and to show them how they can be creative with tech. And so to see this child go home and create this video was really great. Tina, if you want to just play a couple of seconds. This is a stop motion film. All his sound effects are his own too. That's good, just so people can have an idea of. And I don't know if anyone's ever created a stop motion film, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of focus and a lot of patience. And so for
future movie producers here, this is amazing. That was great.
I know.
I love the sound effects. You can get like a full-time job just making sound effects for movies. Have you ever seen that, how they do that? It's amazing. That's a different day, but really, really awesome stuff.
Yeah. And then we do have, so in the expresses creativity, we do have some unplugged examples, especially in our makerspace. We recently had the Great Pumpkin launch, and this I had a hard time choosing if this should go into problem solving or creativity, because I really think so much of what we do crosses over both, and that teamwork, collaboration. The students were challenged to build a catapult out of popsicle sticks and rubber bands to launch a candy pumpkin. And so, there was some discussion of simple machines and levers and a lot of trial and error for the students. And this is where they get that chance to test something out and then go back and refine their thinking and make it better the second time. And they also have a lot of fun. So I think this is a little bit where that design and engineering comes into that for ISTE Innovative Designer, and for AASL that Discover and Innovate. So that innovation piece is really big for us too, and giving kids an opportunity to have an experience that they might not have in the regular core content curriculum. So the Great Pumpkin Launch video is very cute and it's very fast.
Okay.
Let's see how they're working through testing their designs. The final launch. And the excitement over when it works is great too. Yeah. And our last slide, just a few more examples, because again, I do think this innovative designer component, that creativity component, is a huge part of what we do. Just giving kids opportunities to work together to be designers and be engineers. And so the first two photos here are an activity that we just did in the Makerspace, where we introduced the idea of reverse engineering. And I show them a very complicated 3D snowflake design, and they say that there's no way they could ever build it. And then we talk about reverse engineering and how real engineers make observations and take things apart and try to put them back together so that they can learn more about how they work. And so in this activity, students do exactly that. They take something apart and then attempt to put it back together. And then they have to explain to me how the snowflake is constructed. And so everything that we do ties back into really one of these 5-6 domains from the Portrait of a Graduate, but also those key skills that employers are going to be looking for when they graduate in 2033, I think. So that's really what drives us and what drives the lessons and learning opportunities that we create in our library program, really thinking about those key skills that we want our students to have. And I think they also have a lot of fun. I think they have a lot of fun with our library program. So there's a lot of learning going on and a lot of joy too, which is just as important.
Great job, Shelley. This was amazing. I absolutely loved how Shelley and Sharon both balanced in their presentation, and before I open it to questions, but balance the whole idea of plugged and unplugged experiences, because I think that's also something we're trying to really have everyone resonate with, the integration of technology and enhancement. It is about a balance, and we keep using that word balance because we have to be able to provide the foundational skills that, like Shelley talked about, those hard skills, which are about like, how are you using the technology to make sure that they are prepared as they progress through the grade levels, while also recognizing some of those soft skills really happen when you're talking with your peers, when you're not plugged into the computer. And that is so important, especially as you talked about, Shelley, when you're going into the career field, when you're in the real world, whether at any point, right? Whether you're in college, whether you're looking for a job, you need to be able to partner and problem solve collaboratively with more than just in your own head, but with others, right? Debate, deliberate, right? And those are skills that don't just kind of aren't acquired. They just by poof, like here, just figure it out. It's by practice, right? We have to provide practice for students in these areas, and doing that in an unplugged environment is fantastic. One other piece before I open it up that I just want to make sure everybody recognizes, Shelley did a really great job. I'm going to go back to this slide. A library media specialist who has to really take curriculum, not only to support and enhance the core content areas around technology enhancement, but they have their own set of standards. And I'm not sure if people recognize this, but the AASL standards are for school librarians. It's a whole list of standards that the school librarian is expected to teach when the students are with them in isolation, right? And there's a whole nother list of standards for ISTE, which we keep referencing, right? The international standards for technology education. And Shelley did a really great job, as did Sharon, with integrating those two sets of standards together, right? Because that's the job of a library media specialist, is to figure out how to integrate these together while connecting it to that long-term plan in Weston, which is that long-term goal of a Portrait of a Graduate. And connecting those three things together is not an easy thing. And I thought she did a beautiful job of kind of showing how all of those layers weave together through student experiences, not only in the library, but also how she supports classroom instruction. So kudos to you, Shelley. And we do have a couple minutes, and I know I could see Bernie, her wheels are going. So what does anybody have any questions for for Shelley? And I'm sure Bernie's going to start the conversation.
Yeah, actually, it's more of a comment rather than a question. And it's just that one of the most important and most difficult things to do as an educator is to assess student learning. And so while this is a great way of showing all the skills that the students are being exposed to, but it also is a great diversification of the ways that we measure student achievement. And I think it's such a fabulous way to get a better picture of the whole student when you can create these kinds of things that are strength-based. It's easy to differentiate when you have these different kinds of tools at your hands, and you really can get a much better picture of what students actually know when you can find the proper tools for them to show that learning. And I can see how they're doing it right here in these projects, but thinking ahead as they move on to middle school and high school, where you're in a core content area like a science class, and your teacher asks you to prepare something, having had these skills later on opens your toolbox of different ways you can show that advanced learning in your classroom. So I'm so impressed with what you're doing, and I think it's fabulous.
Oh, thank you, Bernie. Thank you.
Don't know why you picked science, Bernie, as the yeah, this is great. Any other questions for Shelley? Well done, Shelley.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. This is Chad. Can you hear me okay,
Chad.
everyone?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. First of all, just to reiterate what you said, Tina, Shelley, thank you so much. That's super informative, and I really, really appreciate all this information here. It's so helpful. I guess, Tina, this may actually be a question for you. It's only because it came up the last meeting for our Hurlbut deep dive, was the question about, like, you know, personal devices and like sort of a broader question about, you know, technology, culture, technology, how we use it within the campus itself. Is this a place to talk about that? Because we rain checked it from last time to maybe to this one. Do we want to get into that subject on this call, or is that a different?
Sure. I
different
forget
sort of
the
format?
question, Chad. I know that part of the conversation was about time on devices. I think that was one of the resonating questions. And I think to that point about balance, I'm not sure if we actually quantify a number of minutes that a student is maybe using a device, if that's the question that you're referring to.
Well, I mean, it's also regarding like personal devices, and I guess this would just
Oh,
be a
right.
broader question of kind of how this fits within the personal device framework that we're all living in now. So,
Yes.
I mean, as one question, Shelley, you made a bunch of really great points about digital citizenship and people thinking about how they are, you know, what they're doing online. The flip side is like what they're sort of receiving or watching or viewing themselves. So I guess the question is, do we want to touch on personal devices too as part of this subject matter?
Yeah, I totally forgot about that one. That was the big question. So
Yeah.
I'll let maybe Patty even chime in first, talk about what we allow at 3.5 around personal devices, if at all.
Sure.
And then also, you know, one of those kind of hot topics that we addressed last year a little bit through our policy, our updated policy was around wearable devices too. So maybe we could just speak a little bit to that too. Thanks, Chad, for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a conversation, an ongoing conversation for the last year. I know Shelley and I have talked a lot about how much time and what's appropriate age-wise for students. You know, when we started having one-on-one devices, we really thought it was really important that we teach children the right way to handle computers. And that's why we began the Maker Tech classes and really teaching them. And we really had a long conversation, I think last year, Shelley and I, is that we're not sending these computers home with third graders. We really feel that they can be used in the classroom some of the time. There's certainly appropriate ways of using the computer, but as they get older, you know, fourth graders and fifth graders, we send them home. We do not really accept any other personal devices at WIS. We don't want phones in school. We don't want wearable, the like Apple Watches, things like that at our level. We just feel it's not necessary, not really appropriate. We provide them with all the technology that they need in school, and it's all monitored. so that
Yes.
teachers there's a way of making sure that whatever students are doing on their computer, they can see, and we can monitor at all times. So it's always safe, in addition to teaching kids how to be respectful and appropriate on computers as well. So.
Gotcha. Thank you, Patty. So question, if a kid brings a device to WIS, what sort of, what's the protocol on that? Just put it in their pocket, or are they?
Yeah, they can keep it in their back. Yeah, they can keep it in their backpack off. And
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if it could be, Chad, there is a policy now. If the principal has discretion, if it becomes a distraction to the child or others, if putting it in the backpack is not appropriate, we've taken it from them when they can take it home at the end of the day. And many times, we've communicated with parents and talked about our policy and what the rules are and asked them to leave it home. We've been able, I think, Patty, right, very successfully.
Yeah.
People have been respectful. Parents have been respectful of that request. And I think we've been pretty successful when we've updated that policy.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
I'll give you my other two questions. You can sort of answer them either together or separately if you want to. So one, Shelley, you mentioned, how to help students understand how to effectively use Google and things like that. How are you building in some, I don't know what you would call it, but I guess like reaction time or something like that? Meaning so much of what search is going to be in the future is AI powered. If you look at like Bing and what Google just launched last week and things like that. So I guess the question is, how are you ensuring that that the curriculum is staying relevant for kids, given how quick all these tech developments change? I'll stop there. That's one question. Too many to tackle two at times.
It's a great question. And so actually, we just attended a professional development yesterday on AI and how it's going to really impact our schools. And you're right, Chad, there's going to be a lot that changes very quickly over the coming years. Currently, students are not using any AI or any generative AI. And part of that has to do with the Connecticut state privacy laws, the data privacy laws. Currently, most forms of generative AI do not comply with our data privacy laws. So we're not integrating it now currently. I think that could change quickly, but I think that's going to be a larger conversation about how to integrate AI in a way that is valuable and meaningful for our students.
Sure. Makes
But
sense.
for sure, it's definitely something that's going to be coming quickly. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
then
Chad,
the last question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tina.
Chad, can I ask what the question is? Because we're at 4:03 and I want to make sure we have the 30 minutes to also go to the next team that is prepared to present today.
Totally. I'll save it.
Ask what it is and then I'll write it down so we can have it, just so that we can, if we have time at the end with the next one, we'll come back to it.
Okay. The question is simply, what kind of rubric or framework do you use to determine if it's better to be a traditional activity, pen and paper kind of thing, or if it's better via tech? What the example of being, if you read something in a tablet, you tend to remember it and retain it much worse than if you read it in paper, depending on the situation. So just more insight on that, but we don't have to get into it.
Okay. Yeah, we can come back
I have
to it.
one very quick item.
Yep.
I think this is great. My only question is, what is the continuity at the middle school? I know what they have at the high school, but what is there a similar program available in the middle school for kids at WIS that express interest in this?
Yeah, we're going to talk. The next presentation is going to be focused only on 6 through 8, so we'll see that transition from 5th grade to the middle school. And Helen's going to speak specifically about her program and what she offers to them.
Okay.
In the next presentation. I want to make sure everybody has enough airtime to really dive into their programs and their curriculum. So great question.
And I presume they build on each other, right? Okay.
Thanks, David.
Stay tuned.
All right, Shelley, great job. Thank you, Patty. Thank you both for coming. Sharon, thank you for coming as well. We're going to transition to our last presentation, making sure that we are giving enough airtime to this conversation as well, which is also very important. There's so much going on right now in education. Sorry to overload the agenda today, but given the timing, we really didn't want to wait to have an additional conversation around the new social studies framework that Connecticut has officially adopted as of October of this school year. So tonight I am joined by, or this afternoon, not tonight. I feel like every time we're together, it seems to bleed into the nighttime. Share this tab instead. Okay. So today we are joined by our 3 curriculum instruction leaders for social studies, supporting our K-12 social studies adoption. As I mentioned, in October of this school year, the state of Connecticut, over the last few years, the last time the social studies standards was written and adopted was in 2015. That was the first time that we connected the Connecticut standards to some components of the National Social Studies Framework. And what we're hoping to do today, this afternoon, we've got Alex Bluestein, who is our 3-5 curriculum instruction leader supporting social studies. Andrea Noble's here as well, supporting our K-2 social studies implementation. And then we have Nick Torres, who's our curriculum instruction leader for secondary, supporting both the middle school and the high school, focusing on social studies. So they're going to really lead the conversation around the changes to the elementary and secondary social studies standards that we are learning more about. We're also going to talk a little bit about the connections between the new standards and what we currently do in Weston, because as you would assume, we don't have to throw everything out. We know that we've already grounded some of our work already connected to our social studies standards. And so how do we build upon that? And then what are some of the major shifts? And so I'm really, I appreciate the 3 of them coming and putting this presentation together. And so I'm going to ask, I believe, Alex is going to begin the conversation. And so I'm going to throw the mic to you.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. If Tina, could we get the next slide?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. So we wanted to kind of start by explaining a little bit about the standards developers and how they began their work. And so they did that by determining some guiding principles around which the standards would be developed. And these principles provided a shared direction and focus for the standards development. Those principles were then distilled into these 6 content themes of justice, representation, inclusivity, global context, agency, and local connections. These themes are intended to help orient both those who work on developing the standards and the educators like us who will shape those standards into grade level curriculum. At the next slide. And so when you view the standards across grade levels and grade level bands, these are the common features you would see across all of them. Central to this continues to be, as it was in the last iteration of the standards, continues to be the inquiry model. And the inquiry model prioritizes students grappling with an essential question designed to spark curiosity around the content and guide students to navigate with resources and material to answer that question. As such, the standards-based content is always a component. However, the inquiry is the vehicle toward uncovering the content rather than the content being the primary focus. And also within every set of standards, all the disciplines are represented. And so we thought this might be a helpful visual in differentiating between content-driven and an inquiry-driven approach. An inquiry is really driven not just by the learning, but by how the learning and the content is approached, why it's important, and the process by which the learning is acquired. The students are at the forefront. The teacher acts more as a facilitator and guide. And within inquiry and within all of these standards, you're going to hear us talk a little bit about vertical alignment and how the standards grow and build from our youngest grades all the way up through 12. As any strong curriculum, this is a component of all strong curriculums. And Andrea is going to talk a little bit more about that vertical alignment now.
Okay, thank you. So in social studies, there are 4 different disciplines that actually help link all of the learning from K straight through 12th grade. Those 4 buckets, so to speak, are history, geography, economics, and civics. So in each grade level, all 4 of these components are a part of the curriculum. And our hope is that as kids are progressing through the grade levels, they're kind of seeing those vertical alignments and connections to what they've learned in prior years, so that each year they're going a little deeper into the topics and subjects, but it should be somewhat familiar to them. Can you click a second time, because there's more to that one? There we go. Thank you, Tina. So in an inquiry arc, there are actually 4 components, and that's what you'll see across the top, the green, purple, blue, and sort of rust color. So, and I'm going to talk to you a little about the inquiry arc as well as the 4 disciplines that feed into that. So Alex kind of launched it a little bit. So the first thing that we're doing is having us pose a compelling question. And a compelling question is going to address an issue that provokes student thinking, and it's aligned to the standards and the curricular outcomes. So that compelling question is linked to those 4 disciplines of history, economics, geography, and civics. There usually is an activity that sets the stage to exploring the question and eliciting the student inquiry and interest and curiosity about the topic. Then there are investigative questions, which is that next part where there's thinking about that being a historian, and those 4 other aspects of the 4 disciplines that are within the social studies realm. So within this next section here, there are often a bunch of supporting questions that are built on that compelling question that allow the kids to dive into each of these areas where they're acting like a historian, looking at the economic aspect of things, thinking like a geographer and how geography impacts something, and also being able to think about the civics and the political aspects of things. The next stage go back, please. The next stage that they'll be in is evaluating sources and using evidence. And in this dimension, students are evaluating and choosing the most compelling evidence that they find to support their answer to the compelling questions. And students, when they are researching, are utilizing primary sources to help them move themselves through trying to answer that compelling question. The last stage is the communicating their conclusions and taking an informed action, and that's dimension 4. In this dimension, students answer the compelling question using the evidence that they've gathered to support their thinking. And then there also may be an option for students to take informed action based upon their findings and what they've discovered. So in kindergarten through 2nd grade, these are the 3 topics that we have within our curriculum. So in kindergarten, there are roles and responsibilities in a community, familiar places, and communities past and present. And compelling questions that we would ask might be something along the lines of what makes a community. In 1st grade, there's contributing to a democratic society, honoring the past and present, as well as global communities. And an example of a question that we currently have in social studies is what makes a community successful. And then in 2nd grade, we have working together as a community, leadership past and present, and decision-making in our world. And a compelling question that we ask is, what does it mean to make a difference in society? In addition to the inquiry aspects of things, I just put in a picture of a few of our read-alouds that we have that we utilize in order to help our students kind of investigate and start understanding and experiencing some thoughts around people of importance, what does it make to be a community, and as well as what we need in order to be a successful community. Off to Alex.
And so then in 3rd grade, students examine how Connecticut's state identity has been shaped by its history, including the culture and impact of Indigenous peoples of our state. Students investigate Connecticut's cultural diversity, their state constitution, our state constitution and government, and economic growth over time. One big question that students will grapple with is the impact that Indigenous people have on both our town and our state. In 4th grade is really a focus on geography and regions, but within that they study human environment interactions, movement of people and ideas, with a focus on geography, culture, environment, and history. And then in 5th grade, students study early United States history, the foundations of our government, and the cultural diversity and emerging national identity, American democracy, and how our history has shaped our national identity. Fifth grade history standards focus on early settlement through the Revolutionary War and the creation of our government.
Can I just pause us there for one
Yeah.
second? Because I want to make sure there's some context behind what we were trying to explain and dive a little deeper when we were presenting today. Because one thing we wanted to highlight, as I mentioned at the beginning, is we've got some new trajectories of standards, right? These new standards have been adopted. They've been updated. There are pieces that are the same in certain grade levels. And although we have not started our curriculum revision process, we, Andrea, Alex, Nick, and I, we've been going to professional development. We've been diving deeper into these standards. So at face value, we do have some projects that we feel may align and may fit to the new standards that have been adopted, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
on the left two sides, right, the left two columns here of these slides, when we're looking at that alignment, we're looking at what are the standards that have been adopted and presented. And then in the last column, we were really trying to say, we don't have to throw everything out. We do have some projects that we're currently doing that are connected to our standards, the new standards, and we may maintain them. As I said, I just want to make sure this is not set in stone, because we obviously have not convened our K-12 social studies committee yet, knowing that this was coming. But at face value, we wanted to also connect what is currently in practice to some of those new standards, which is good practice, and that is what should happen when they are designing and redesigning standards. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands some of the way that we designed this presentation for today.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. I think that's important because in particular, if you look at the column on the right, especially for 4th and 5th grade, these are questions that we have embedded in cross-curricular units that in some ways go beyond the standards that we currently have, and also mesh nicely with the new standards. So they are things to consider as we move forward in terms of how we may keep, adopt, change, shift what we're currently doing. We wanted to highlight the good work that is currently being done. Thank you.
So in 6th grade, we have World Regional Studies 1, and in 7th grade, World Regional Studies 2. Going along with what Tina and Alex were just saying, this isn't a whole lot of deviation from the way our current pathway is set up. So in grade 6, students are looking at world geographic regions. That's essentially what they're doing in our current grade 6 curriculum, looking at different systems of government and economic decision making. So things like why people settle in river valleys and divisions of labor and specialization of jobs and things like that. In the 6th grade, they already do this really fantastic Guardians of the Earth project that's sort of like a capstone where they identify a salient issue in the modern world that they have come across over the course of their 6th grade year. And so that's one of those things that, looking at the new standards, I would argue, not only can we keep it, but it almost confirms how good some of the things we already do are. And so, like I said, grade 7 is World Regional Studies 2. So continuing along, and then grade 8 is U.S. History 2. So this is where there's kind of a significant change here. Typically, and in the past, U.S. history has been dealt with in the traditional sort of 2 phases, using the Civil War as your partition. So antebellum and postbellum, like US 1, US 2. Now it's split into 3. So 5th grade picks up that early settlement up to the Revolution, and then 8th grade is looking at late colonial America. There's a little bit of overlap, the early Republic, and then up to the Civil War. So when we're thinking about those social studies content areas that are not just history, but civics, economics, and geography, by narrowing the scope of the historical content a little bit, it enables the students to really delve deeper into some of those non-history content areas. So we're really excited about that. And going on to the high school courses, the new standards identify modern world history. Again, this is a course we already teach at the 10th grade level. Chronologically speaking, it expands a little bit of the timeline. So when we go into, the curriculum revision process, that's what we'll be looking at. But in terms of the inquiry that's built into this, it very much aligns to what we're doing with students. Next, we have American History or U.S. History 3. So this is Reconstruction up to the modern age. And then finally, we have civics, with U.S. history and civics being required courses for graduation. They're statutory requirements for graduation. And again, we do so much good work already, and looking at so many of these new standards really kind of highlights a lot of the really good things that we're doing. And, our civics and government class currently is very much simulation based. So the students do these sort of authentic simulations where they are actually trying to pass bills through committees. And they have an executive simulation where they are executive cabinet level department heads, and they have a crisis that has come onto their plate, and they have to present the president with an option. And so, that's where we are in the high school level. And then I'll pass it back to Alex to talk about the vertical articulation piece.
Yeah, so Andrea and I are gonna do this one together. Would you move to the second? Thank you. So you've heard us talk about inquiry and vertical alignment. The focus on inquiry allows for vertical alignment across grade level bands. You may see as we move forward that some of the standards are for per grade level and some are by band of grade levels. You'll see more about that in a minute. So this is alongside the content, but is a continuum of standards that focus on how students engage with the content in meaningful ways that provide us a K-12 continuum of development. Since inquiry has always been a component of the social studies standards, the new vertical alignments will provide us opportunities to strengthen and expand the amazing work we're already doing in district. And so now Andrea is going to walk us through some examples of those standards alignments across the grades.
Okay, thank you. So the first standard we're going to talk about is an inquiry learning progression that we're going to take a look at. So when Alex was talking about bands, this is sort of what you see like in grades 1 and 2. And what you can see is an inquiry learning progression that starts in first and second grade would be something along the lines of determine the kinds of sources that will be helpful in answering a compelling and supporting questions. What you'll see is that is sort of a foundation of which there's now stepping stones that build up across the grade levels. In third grade, what you notice in the bold print is kind of how it kind of adds on another layer and dimension to it. So now they're doing that with taking into consideration the different opinions of people and how that impacts them answering their question. In grades 6 to 8, now you're talking about multiple points of view being represented in your sources. And in high school, you're taking into consideration multiple viewpoints in sources, the types of sources available, as well as the potential uses of the sources. And all embedded in here, we also teach our kids how to read sources to look for bias. So that's all a big piece of what we do with that. So that's an example of an inquiry learning progression. And then an example of a history learning progression would be in kindergarten, the kids are going to be identifying a variety of primary sources to explain how people lived in the past. So they start with personal stories about their families, their artifacts. We talk about newspapers and photographs. By second grade, they're identifying sources that we can look about past and present on the national, state, and local level. So like the monuments that we have at in the Weston Town Green, right? So what are those and why are they there? And really delving into learning about the past by learning about those monuments. By grade 4, they learn how to summarize different kinds of sources that can be used to understand settlements and resettlements. Then in 7th grade, you can kind of see how that is really moved into much more global related types of issues and regional significant issues. And by high school, that link to the high school modern world history class.
So going back to this idea that the new standards kind of mesh with a lot of what we already do, we just looked at 2 vertical progressions of an inquiry example and then a history example. And so I thought it would be important to kind of just talk about how we are already doing some of those things and where we will be picking up with the standards. So, you know, in terms of the inquiry example that we just looked at, we work on a lot of those skills already within our district curricula. So we work on reliable sourcing, critiquing sources for bias. We use SHEG, one of the resources we use. It's the Stanford History Educational Group, and they have a whole bunch of resources that are sort of middle school and even upper primary school friendly, all the way up to high school friendly about how we read and analyze sources. We have 612 access to Newsela, which is really great because it creates, it modifies text for students. It has reading for information questions that are aligned to the text, and it actually is a reliable bank of current events articles. We teach source evaluation strategies in all of our classrooms, grades 3 through 5, and then in all of our social studies classes, grades 6 through 12. And the library learning commons in our schools have a huge, you know, collection of databases. And I think, you know, Shelley did a great job of talking about the way that the library supports inquiry in this district, and it's really quite impressive. All of our library media specialists do a really good job of informing both teachers and students of how to use the databases in the most efficient ways possible, and then they curate book and magazine collections, and they actually push into our classes to support our students and to support us as teachers. And then talking about the idea of multiple viewpoints. So this idea of recognition of equal humanity, it's that comes from Danger of a Single Story. And it's the idea that 2 people who have different perspectives are equally deserving of respect, right? And so that's something we teach our students. We work on that with them. We start in the 6th grade with this lunchroom fight scenario, which is it's sort of it's an analogy for if you are in if you have different perspectives, you might perceive an event to be different. We have students watch The Danger of the Single Story TED Talk, and we encourage multiple perspectives in historical debates, structured discussions, current events activities. And, you know, as we are ensuring that our students can be well informed and that they can reliably critique sources for, you know, being able to identify when something is, you know, misinformation or not, or opinion versus fact. We encourage them to, you know, extend that skill and then think about multiple perspectives. So as long as you can access sources in a reliable way, then you should be able to have a collegial and academic debate that includes multiple perspectives. And then, so that's the connection to the inquiry standard that we were just looking at. In connection to the history standard, if you notice that history standard was the vertical progression that led all the way up to students using multiple sources to learn about genocide, human trafficking, and then eventually by the time they get to modern world studies, the Holocaust. If you could go to the next slide. So this is where we already do a lot of those things at the high school level. So when we look at the new standards and we see that this standard that begins in kindergarten using multiple sources to learn about different people's experiences, and it builds and builds and builds until they get to high school where they're learning about the experiences of people in the Holocaust. And we look at our current curriculum and we see multiple ways that we already do a lot of those things. So our modern world studies class is really actually quite impressive because it talks about anti-Semitism prior to the Holocaust. And that's really important that students understand that anti-Semitism is something that has existed historically and did not just start in the 1930s. They learn about pogroms of the Russian Empire. They learn about how anti-Semitism has been used to promote nationalism in the 1920s and 30s. They learn about the Holocaust explicitly and resistance and the Nuremberg trials. American studies, the new standards, as well as our current curriculum, deal with the Holocaust from the American perspective. And then we also have a class called Facing History and Ourselves, which really deals more discreetly with the history of the Holocaust, but also directly connects it to modern day expressions of anti-Semitism. And so when we look at that standard, that history progression, and then we look at where we are as a district, we're doing a lot. And so the new standards will mesh very well with what we're already doing. And we also believe that we will be able to elevate our instruction even to a higher level with the new standards.
And so as we round out this presentation, as we did earlier, every month we do have specific educational themes or events that we honor or celebrate within our curriculum. This past month, we were focusing on Computer Science Week. We've done Native American Heritage Month in November. Coming up in January, we will be honoring International Holocaust Remembrance Day with guest speakers at the middle school and the high school level. And we've already, Nick is really leading some of the charge with the principals around different educational experiences that also result in guest speakers to relive some of their experiences in that time. I don't know if Nick, you wanted to quickly mention some of what's happening in January, if you don't mind.
Sure. So at the middle school, we're going to be having 3 separate grade level assemblies. So every student in the school will hear from Renee Pessin. She's a resident of Reading, and her parents were Holocaust survivors. As we know, as time goes on, this year will be 78 years since the end of World War II, and it's harder and harder to find survivors who are still with us. And so the kids of survivors are taking on a lot of that now, and they are sharing their family stories. At the high school, we'll have a speaker from the last 2 blocks of the day. His name's Andy Sarkany. He has come to speak to our Facing History class in the past. He grew up in the Jewish ghetto in Budapest during World War II. And so he talks about his father was taken to a concentration camp. He talks about the ways that he was sort of kept safe within the community during the Holocaust. And then he also has some really profound experiences of living in post-World War II communist Hungary and until the 1950s when he fled to the United States. So, these, especially Mr. Sarkany, he might be the only living Holocaust survivor that our students actually get to meet because there are so few left. And so we really wanted to give this opportunity to our students.
Thanks, Nick. So moving forward, just some next steps as we think about what now has been adopted in October and some goals and expectations as we move into the summer and then beyond. As we've done in the past, we will be running a more intensive summer curriculum academy, specifically focusing on social studies now that these standards have been adopted. We were waiting a little bit we were hoping that they were actually going to be approved and adopted a little sooner. Initially, they were supposed to be adopted in August, but that even didn't happen. So here we are a couple months later. So now we feel that we have the approved standards to actually begin some of that curriculum unpacking and auditing similar to what we've shown you today. What are some of the units and texts and resources that we currently have that are aligned to the current grade level standards and units of study throughout the district? And then what are some of our areas that we want to really focus in on to make revisions and acquire maybe new resources and make some additional connections across all other content areas, but all specifically within the K-12 social studies continuum. We know we need to provide some professional development to our staff from now until next school year. So we've carved out some time, obviously, within our professional development time days throughout this school year to unpack some of these standards to make sure that everyone's aware of the changes to the K-12 continuum. And then hopefully by the end of the summer, after our teams work and unpack and realign some of our curriculum units, we'll be able to then use our August days to provide explicit professional learning for our teachers to show the changes to curriculum so that they feel confident for implementation for next school year. This will likely be a scaffolded process, I would assume. Nick has also already started some of this work at the high school level with one specific course that we know from our learnings over the last couple months that those standards and the courses would remain the same. So we've already begun a little bit of that work this last summer, but not at the extent to which we need to look at that K-12 revision. And so these three individuals will be helping lead some of that work. And we know we've already got some teachers that are really excited for the work ahead and are ready to engage in that work and that revision. So we were kind of waiting for this this transition around those standards, and here we are. So we know we can now execute a plan a little bit more with integrity and fidelity moving forward. Okay, so we are at 4:37. Great job, Andrea, Alex, and Nick. We really appreciate the thoroughness. It is a lot of information. So for those of you that are listening live or on the recording, it's always a lot to kind of unpack within a 30-minute time frame. And so we are going to open up, sir, for some questions. If anyone has any, we are 8 minutes over, but I hope that we can answer a couple questions before we end. And if we have additional questions, we'd love to be able to come back to this this environment and follow up with any additional questions that we may not get to today. David, did you want to start?
Yeah. All right. So you know that last time we met, I talked about the lack of Holocaust education in elementary school and intermediate school, and you said let's wait and defer to find out what the state changes are.
Mm-hmm.
And there aren't any. This is still the 2018 standard. So what are we doing as a district to introduce this to Hurlbut and WIS?
So the updated standards, and Nick, you might want to, and Alex, you might want to chime in here, but the updated standards by the state does not start actually teaching the Holocaust until high school. Is that correct?
Yeah,
right.
But hold on a minute. Just for clarification,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a change. That's the standard that was implemented in 2018, right?
So there, go ahead, guys, if you want to chime in.
I think those standards were from
2015.
15, yes. Yes. So that, yes, as far as what we're teaching at WIS in terms of history, yes, that has not shifted to including history content on the Holocaust at WIS.
Yeah, and again, I know this is an ongoing conversation, but as a public school, we rely on the state standards to guide that development of units and at what grade is developmentally appropriate, surrounded by teachers that can facilitate those conversations. So we do introduce, Nick, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about prepping to engage in that conversation with the Holocaust presentation in January. Although we don't have units of study that are specific to the curriculum K-12, we want to make sure that when students are having conversations around any topic that may trigger emotion, that we have staff members and we have students that have some context and background before we engage in that. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what they're doing, even though we don't have a unit of study, let's say in 6th grade specific to the Holocaust, before we get to the presenter.
Can I do want to hear what Nick has to say, but I don't want to in the limited time that we have, we're moving back to what we're doing at the high school level, and we're teaching to the state standards. And I feel that Weston should not be using state standards as the be all. We should be teaching above what the state requires. And of course, we have an obligation to do what the state wants. But is there just not, I don't have the exact words, but is there just not a willingness at this time to introduce the Holocaust to our elementary and intermediate school children? We teach them about a lot of other things that are probably way beyond state standards, but not the Holocaust. And for age appropriateness, there's a ton of age appropriate material. Anne Frank is just one quick example.
In social studies, that is not a focus at WIS. What we do have are whole class mentor texts, interactive read alouds in 4th and 5th grade that directly address the Holocaust, take place during World War II. And the reason that we do that at those grade levels is so that the teachers can have those conversations with children in order to ensure that the appropriateness of what we're sharing is meeting up with that it's appropriate for our age and grade of students. So all 4th grade and all 5th grade, I was actually in a 5th grade classroom today because it's part of, oh, I'm sorry, my lights went out. It's part of our 5th grade historical fiction unit. And that is happening in all 5th grade classrooms as we speak. So that conversation can happen. It's not taught in terms of a history unit looking at nonfiction artifacts in social studies. I'm not sure if that helps. But, and the read aloud they do in 4th grade, actually, the book takes place in a Japanese internment camp. And that's a conversation that happens, again, so that teachers can be part of that conversation, can answer student questions, and sort of ensure the appropriateness of the content that's being shared.
Alex, when was that introduced? Because I have a child that went through WIS and he was not exposed to that.
That's been, in 4th grade, the read aloud has been, I want to say since COVID. The 5th grade read aloud that they use, it's a book by Patricia Polacco. It's called The Butterfly. That's been in every 5th grade classroom that teaches historical fiction since pre-COVID.
And there's we've done the historical units there's so many incredible books on the Holocaust that's age appropriate for grades 4 and 5. I mean, even since I was teaching 5th grade, that's like 20 years ago.
We have several book club books that book club books are not guaranteed to every child like a read aloud is, but they're books that students may have options to read that take place during the Holocaust. Yep. And again, an essential feature of that unit is understanding the historical context, the global context, the local context, wherever the story takes place, and the impact on the characters. It's quite an in-depth unit.
Okay, so I do understand the nuance between it being part of curriculum and social studies, which it's not, and Weston or WIS doing something to introduce it to the students. To me, at the end of the day, it's one and the same, right? I just would like to make sure our children are introduced to it. So can you just explain, read aloud, are you saying it's an optional book that children may, okay. So
it's in 5th grade for this unit, it is a part of our curriculum and all the 5th grade teachers read it. And the student, they read it over day. It's a picture book. However, they read it over days. The students discuss parts of it. They respond to it. They have group discussion. They have class discussion.
Okay. And that's at 5th grade. And what book is that?
It's called The Butterfly by Patricia Polacco. It's a beautiful book. And it doesn't, Patricia Polacco is one of those authors that is really exceptional at addressing the big thing in a child-friendly way. And so, which is one of the reasons that we chose that as our anchor text for that unit.
Okay. And what about at the 6th grade level? Because I see in the 7th grade, is the 7th grade, is that new? it's funny. I was looking through the deck that we got ahead of the meeting, and then I was looking at your live deck, Tina. So the let me just scroll to it. So for me, the West End Middle School. So on January 26th, there'll be 3 grade level assemblies. That will be for the entire middle school, 6, 7, 8.
Yes.
And is that new or that's been in place?
I'm not sure. Can anyone speak to that? The presenters, the guest speakers that are coming in this year, is that a new experience that all students would engage in for grade 6 through 12, or is that new this year?
During the time I've been CIL, I know that we've done things for Holocaust Remembrance Day, but I'm not sure that we've had 3 grade level assemblies before.
Okay, I think that. Go, Tina.
Can you just talk a little bit about the preparation prior to the guest speaker coming, Nick, a little bit? Because I know that there is some kind of pre-work between teachers and students to make sure that they're prepared for the presentations.
Yeah, so, going along with the idea of making sure that everything is age appropriate and that students are sort of prepared for what they might hear, and knowing that students haven't learned explicitly necessarily about the Holocaust by 6th grade, we as a department, we have our meeting this week. We're going to talk about what kinds of conversations we should have with our students ahead of the actual speakers coming in, a little bit of the historical background, and also talking about how students can expect to feel as they're starting to hear some of these stories. This is, it's kind of interesting because sometimes we go into these conversations with students going into some of these conversations with students forgetting that they are also exposed to a lot of things on social media. And so sometimes these conversations also lead into other conversations about things that students have seen on social media as well. And I think with the current conflict in the Middle East, it's important that we talk about these things explicitly with students, and they may also bring up things that students are seeing and questions they have related to the current events going on in the Middle East. But as far as the Holocaust speakers, we're wanting to make sure that students understand the general history of what happened in a broad sense, but also really just feel sort of emotionally prepared for the reality of what they might hear. It's not going to be necessarily comfortable to listen to stories about the suffering of people, the persecution of people based on their race and religion. And so we want students to feel equipped for that.
That's at the middle school and the high school, or just the high school?
The middle school. So I'm talking about the middle school specifically because they haven't learned about the Holocaust yet. But for the high school, because most of these conversations are already happen in the course of 10th grade because they study the Holocaust in 10th grade. And so they have a lot of these conversations. They also study other genocides in the 10th grade, like the Congolese genocide or the Armenian genocide. And also in 9th grade, they learn about scapegoating of Jews and anti-Semitism during the Black Plague and in Europe. And so a lot of these conversations, students have been sort of, they've sort of been primed for these conversations by the time they are in high school. So, and also at the high school level, all of our teachers have had explicit conversations with their social studies classes about the conflict in the Middle East going on right now. So we actually, as a department, came together with Megan and Tina. We talked about the idea of addressing the concerns of students. We had lunch and learns where students could come in and talk to adults about the current conflict and how they might be feeling about it. And so we don't necessarily feel like we have to have those pre-conversations with the high schoolers because they've had a lot of those conversations.
Okay, so just to kind of sum up, I think where we're at, the conflict in the Middle East, I don't think really changes much. It brings to our attention the importance of the Holocaust remembrance. But, you know, even when the conflict in the Middle East is, you know, history and read about in history, the Holocaust still is going to stand by itself. So my question is it fair to say, because I want to see that we're moving in the right direction. So is it fair to say that in the middle school, our 6th graders, 7th grader, and 8th graders, I think for the first time, will be participating in school-wide assemblies?
At least in the time that I've been CIL. So I've been CIL for 4 years. And as far as I know, yes. It was also kind of hard to do that during COVID because of the age of many of the survivors. But, you know, that's not an excuse, but yes.
Right. No, I mean, I'm not looking, you know, I'm a big believer in, I don't look in the rearview mirror. I use it sometimes to guide me. But the history, the past is the past, right? So if we're moving in the right direction, you know, it's, you know, at some point, that's what you do. So, okay. So then, and in the 4th grade, there is age appropriate, I'm sorry, the 5th grade rather, there's age appropriate read out loud. So we seem to have 2 gaps. We have a gap in 6th grade, at least from a continuity perspective, or are we doing anything in the 6th grade to, yeah, I'm sorry. I got my numbers wrong. 6, 7, and 8 is at the middle school, and we are introducing at 5th grade, right? Not 4th grade.
Correct.
We are now the Holocaust is there are books in 4th grade in our classroom libraries that take place, like Number the Stars. I mean, that is one of the perennial books that is available to 4th grades. That we have teachers that do use that as a read aloud at their discretion. And we do have a common read aloud now in 4th grade, like I said, that takes place during World War II, but it takes place in a Japanese internment camp and does reference the broader historical context of that.
I'm sorry, you said that's 5th grade or 4th grade?
That's 4th grade.
The 4th grade. Okay. Okay. So maybe what we can do is we can look at for next school year, trying to get some more age appropriate stuff. Because there is age appropriate stuff as young as 1st graders, right? It's just a matter of.
And I can tell you that, you know, as you know, in 3rd through 5th, we are embarking on the new ARC core ELA curriculum next year. And there is a pretty in-depth historical fiction unit in 4th grade. So that is an opportunity for us to ensure that we have a broad range of topics of historical significance that we are embedding into that unit.
And we just want to be very clear with any topic that may trigger a lot of emotion, especially for our younger learners, that they are facilitated and I can't think of the right word, but they're surrounded by adults who are caring adults that can facilitate a conversation of debate and multiple perspectives, that they can answer questions so that there's no misconceptions in some of these conversations, so that we are also recognizing any of their emotions that may be triggers or responsive to text, regardless of what it is. I think this is an ongoing conversation that we need to be mindful of, that while we as adults are comfortable in maybe our family environments because we've had open dialogue around certain things, that is not necessarily the case for every family. And we need to be able to have some open dialogue to make sure that the timeliness of certain topics and the text that we integrate within the curriculum are good for all students, and that we have adults that are grounding with children around these conversations, right? Because we don't want to hear that students are, can't sleep at night, they're having nightmares. We want to make sure that they're supported when we make decisions like this as well.
I would echo that. I think one of the most common responses from kids at this age is, as we can all imagine, disbelief that something like that could happen. And so we do walk a fine line between going too deep into the content in a non-age appropriate way, And the other side of that, like I call it like dancing on top of a fence, right? Like which, you got to like stay the course. The other side of that coin is not doing it enough justice, right? So it's too important to gloss over, and it's not something that we want to engage with in a non fourth and fifth friendly way, if that makes sense.
I mean, it makes sense to me. And I think just to kind of understand where I'm coming from, and I think most people would agree, the rise in well, it's not really a rise. Anti-Semitism has been a problem for a long time. We tend to think it's just uneducated or uninformed people, right? And that's what the hope is. So that's why my hope is that by bringing it into our schools, and as many schools as possible at the age appropriateness, when kids are going to make a decision on an action, that action is steeped in knowledge, right? It's hard to hold a child accountable when they don't understand. So that's really, I think, where I'm coming from, and talking to other Jewish families. I think that's what we're really asking for, or acknowledging. You can't say something's anti-Semitism if you don't know what anti-Semitism is to begin with. And so it's partly the home, your parental responsibility, but we have to bring it into the schools as well, because we bring a lot of other things from the past into schools. So yeah, so really that's kind of where I'm at, and I think that this is progress. I think it's quite good progress. I'm really happy to hear that we're doing something in the middle school, and let's look at what we can potentially do in the coming school year for our youngest learners.
Yeah, and to that point, David, we do look at a variety of different sources. We do lean on the ADL website to help us answer some of those questions, to make sure that those resources are developmentally appropriate. And I think as we move forward, to your point, into PL and into this professional learning and into the Summer Curriculum Academy, now that we have an approved list of standards to help us guide and reflect on some of these pieces, we can also reflect on some of our units and kind of evolve, right, over time. So it's a slow and steady process, while still being mindful of our students and meeting them where they're at as well.
And I don't want you to think we're not doing anything at Hurlbut. We read a lot of books with our students about being mindful and respectful of, you learn about me, I learn about you. These are the things that are the same about us. These are the things that are different about us. And we can still be friends, right? We can respect what's different as well as the ways in which we're the same. And we do a lot of work with our students at Hurlbut in those areas, and we do a lot of that work with read alouds, many of which are on the Anti-Defamation League's list of resources of books in order for us to make sure that we are doing our part. So I don't want you to think that we are not participating in this.
All right, then it might be helpful too, just to kind of get word out, right? Because if I don't know this and I'm on the Board of Ed, I bet you there are a lot of parents who aren't on the Board of Ed who have the same questions. So I think it's important that if we are doing this, we should make sure that parents know what we're doing. Quite frankly, it helps transcend what the kids are doing in school to what happens at home. So a parent who may have very little knowledge of the Holocaust, whose child comes home and says, hey, we learned something about the Holocaust, it might help the parent bridge I always talk about, kind of bridging what happens in school with home and vice versa. So.
Well, this isn't the last conversation for sure. As we evolve, we'll come back and we'll do a follow-up and an update regarding our changes and improvements. But I think this is to your point, David, a good step in the right direction. I thank everybody for spending the extra time today to kind of answer questions. If there is additional questions, Chad, Bernie, or David, please send them along and we can always circle back to this conversation. It's, this is not a one and done. In education, we're constantly evolving. So I am going to close the agenda though, because we're at 5 o'clock right now. Wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, a Merry Christmas, a happy Kwanzaa. And you have seen on the agenda, we do have some next meeting topics for January. We'll talk about some of the some of the tri-state math report and what we're doing with that information moving into next school year or this school year and beyond. And then we're going to continue with our presentation for the 6 through 8 technology lens, and Helen Knudsen will be working on that. So I'm done with our agenda. I'm going to close that, and I'll hand it over to you, Bernie, but I really appreciate everybody staying on for an extra half an hour to talk about this very important topic.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, David, for those great questions, and to the team for leading such a in-depth response and helping us get such a better understanding of what's going on. Because we're so late on time, I think it's probably best that we postpone the approval of the minutes until next session. So we'll do 3 months worth in that spot. But so to help everybody get home, if I could have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
All right, in a second.
Yeah, I second.
All right. Well, we will see you all next month. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yes, yes.
Happy New Year, everyone. Happy holidays.
Bye, you too. Thanks, everybody.